Well, good morning, everyone. It's good to see you all. We have a particular fellowship this morning, and we approach it all as learners. We are all learning. We are all learning together. And this morning's message can best be described as a very healthy salad, full of vegetables, maybe a little bit of sauce, a little seasoning, but it's not dessert. It's not, it may not delight all your taste buds, but it will be healthy, and it will, I hope, be nourishing. And if you have a fine taste, you might really enjoy it. And I'd like to begin by presenting a contrast, or presenting a choice. Okay, Kenny, can I use you as an example? Okay, I'm gonna start in this way. Let's pretend I can give you a choice. Okay, you're a young man here in college, and you have a lifetime ahead of you, and you love God and you want to follow God. Okay, I can give you a book. I can give you a manual. It will be a guide full of instructions for your life. Whatever crisis you come to, you can open the manual and you can find the answer. Whatever big decision you have to make, you can find it in here. What you should major in. You're decided, right? Are there any undecided ones here? Undecided? Okay. I could give you this book and it'll tell you what you should major in. It'll tell you what kind of job you should take. It'll tell you who you should marry. It'll tell you how you should raise your children. You just follow this book. It is the precepts for righteous living. And you know what? If you can't find the instructions, sometimes it's no problem, because all you have to do is find somebody who is older and wiser and ask that person, and that person will tell you on what page, what chapter, you can find the answer for your life. Okay, that's one choice. How does that sound? Not bad, right? Okay, here's the other choice. Here's the other choice. I'll tell you that instead of a printed manual of life instructions, I'm going to give you a person. And this person will walk with you all the days of your life. And this is a person who will always be there with you. But this person, you cannot see with your own eyes. You cannot hear with your own ears. And often, when you speak to him, it may seem like he's silent. And when he does speak, he does not speak so loudly, but he speaks in a still, small voice. So quiet that you have to really calm yourself to hear what he's saying. And even when you hear him, you're still not sure if you heard him correctly. And this person will be the one that you will love, you will be one with, and whom you will follow all the days of your life. Now, that's the choice. Okay, thank you, Kenny. I won't ask you who your choice is, but I will ask you, which one is easier? Which one is easier? You don't have to answer out loud. And then based on that, consider honestly, which one is your preference? So I'm not going to answer that question. I'm going to leave it there for you to think about. And we may come back to this at the end of our half hour or so together. But I would like to welcome all of you warmly to this second meeting of this spring semester. This entire school year, Christian Students has been covering as a general topic the life and letters of the Apostle Paul. The Apostle Paul is one of the most crucial figures in not just the Bible, but even in world history. And he was one who was a deeply religious person, a zealot for his own religion, and a persecutor of the early Christians. Such a persecutor that if he himself was not a murderer, he was at the very least an accomplice to murder. And yet he had a very personal confrontation with the living God. and he became a Christian, and it became his quest to know Christ. And he traveled announcing Christ as the gospel and raising up churches. And last semester we covered a lot about his journeys, which I think were often exciting. And this semester we're beginning to focus more on his letters, his epistles, how he corresponded to the churches. And we've covered some of his earliest letters so far, 1 Thessalonians and last week Galatians. And we felt we needed to linger at a particular point right now, because this is a big theme in Paul's life and in the entire New Testament. And that is a contrast, a choice, a distinction between Christ and religion. And last week we had a particular message. I just don't have the time to repeat it. I encourage you to watch it on YouTube. And so this week we'll build upon that. And I've asked the students to draw this map, and this is really helpful. I hope we can remember this actually. This is, okay, who knows modern day, what is this right here? Yeah, the Mediterranean Sea, right? And so this is generally the Holy Land, Middle Eastern area, and this is what we may call modern day Turkey. But this was the area where Paul traveled. And I hope you can see this. Jerusalem is where we traditionally think the center of all things holy, the center of all things religious, and that is, if you wanted to be in God's move, that's where you wanted to be. But Paul, in his travels, traveled out of Antioch, and he was traveling in this area, and then periodically he would go down to Jerusalem and report what God had been doing. In this area, you mainly have the Jewish people, many of whom were turning to receive Christ. It's awesome. But then in this area, Paul is moving among the Gentiles, the non-Jews. And so this morning we're going to do a little bit of Google Earth. This is like the big picture, and then we're going to zoom in, zoom out, zoom in. I want you to really see something. And we want you to see this theme of Christ and religion. And let me start in this way, okay? We need to define what we mean by religion. The lowest understanding, the most, just the most elementary thought is that Christ equals religion. Okay, we want to break this concept. Okay, if you can advance from that elementary thought, you may see Christ does not equal religion. That's an advancement. Okay, that's an advancement. But that's not good enough. Okay? You may say, well, I know what's better. Christ is better than religion. And that's good. And actually, I think many of you have probably seen that YouTube video. You know what I'm talking about? 17 million views in the past 2 weeks. Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, that's not bad. Christ is better than religion. But what we presented last week was Christ is versus religion. And you have to watch that message if you missed it. Okay, I don't have the time to repeat it. But let's talk about what do we mean by religion? Thinking about it in the context of the New Testament. How about just with your neighbor or in groups of 2s or 3s? Try to come up with a one-sentence working definition of what we mean by religion. Just talk with your neighbor. Okay. Anybody want to just throw out one sentence working definition? Don't be embarrassed. Okay, Jared.
A set of beliefs and practices associated with the supernatural to some extent.
Very good. Wow. Very good. Anybody else? Anybody? Don't be afraid.
Trying to serve God without Christ.
Wow. That is very good. That's very deep. Anybody else? So this is all good. I'll just read you. I looked it up in the Oxford Dictionary last night. A particular system of faith and worship. A particular system of faith and worship. And I really like Ross's definition. And I would give this working definition, which is very similar to Ross's. Religion is attempting to worship God without the presence of God. Attempting to worship God without the presence of God. And so we're going to present a couple case studies this morning, in case you don't believe me. And you say, wow, that's quite a, I thought this was a Christian meeting. And you're talking about religion as worshiping God without the presence of God. If I've offended you, hear me out. let's turn to our verse sheet. And let's start, I want to use this as the first case study. Matthew 3, 1 and 4. How about we read these verses all together? This is very much how the New Testament begins, with the arrival of a very wild person named John the Baptist. Ready? Go.
Now in those days John the Baptist appeared, preaching in the wilderness of Judea. Now this John had his garment of camel's hair and a leather girdle around his loins, and his food was locusts and wild honey.
Okay, I just will have to hope that many of you are familiar with John, who really was a priest in the most unorthodox sense. And when it says John the Baptist, it doesn't mean he was like, that's like his denomination, John the Baptist. He was John the Baptizer. He arrived and he was baptizing people, saying, repent! You need to repent for your ways. And he'll just take you and dunk you in the River Jordan. I mean, there had never been anybody like this before. And he was on the scene. He was clothed, right, wearing camel's hair. I mean, if I showed up looking like him, you would all leave. And he's eating locusts. Well, this is, I cannot impress you enough how emphatic God was to start the New Testament era by bringing this person on the scene. The most, talk about blowing your religious concepts. So he is there baptizing people. But then let's jump ahead to Matthew 9, verses 14 and 15. Let's read those verses all together. Ready, go.
Then the disciples of John came to him, saying, why do we and the Pharisees fast much, but your disciples do not fast? And Jesus said to them, the sons of the bride chamber cannot mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them, can they? But days will come when the bridegroom will be taken away from them, and then they will fast.
Let me paint the picture a little bit more full here. John arrived on the scene baptizing people, but then he said, I'm just a forerunner. I'm going to introduce Christ. And then Christ comes on the scene. And now Christ, as the Son of God, he is beginning his ministry. And so naturally, John and his disciples, you would think, would start to recede. And this Jesus, he himself came blowing people's concepts, right? First, John and his disciples messed everybody up by eating locusts and wild honey. And then, and then he wouldn't even really eat. He fasted a lot. So the disciples of John, guess what? They started a culture, a religion, a practice of fasting. Well, John the Baptist, he's wild. He doesn't even eat. He fasts. I'm a disciple of John. Now I'm going to fast. And then Jesus comes. And Jesus, not only does he eat and drink, but in this context, Matthew 9, do you know who he's eating and drinking with? Sinners and tax collectors. He is there, in their parties, so to speak, at the head table, eating with the sinners. And the disciples of John are incredulous. They say, why do we and the Pharisees, we fast so much? But your disciples don't fast. Okay, the point I want to make is how quickly something that was very unreligious became religious. Do you see that? I mean, John the Baptist couldn't have been more of a departure. But within a few years, actually months, what he had begun so radically was now systematized into a religion of fasting. And so even Jesus was there, and they're saying, why don't you fast? Why don't your disciples fast? We all fast. And how did the Lord respond? The Lord responded, the sons of the bride chamber cannot mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them. So what the Lord is saying is, I am the bridegroom. I am the guy about to get married. I am joyful. If you are with me, you better be joyful. You know, there's nobody happier than a bride or her groom. I was at a wedding yesterday, a friend of mine from childhood, and he literally has wanted to get married since age 13. And it's taken some time, a couple decades. And I can honestly say, for a long time, I felt like he just was not that happy. You know, his joy was, he just wanted to get married so bad, and he had no wife, he had no bride. But last night, he was so joyful. And I realized I had almost forgotten how happy he used to be. Because for so long, there was just a deep sadness. And he was so joyful. Once I was in his presence, I had to be happy. Okay, this is the point the Lord is making. If you are with me as a bridegroom, because I'm happy, you better be happy. And this is actually the principle for how we esteem things. The principle is, do we have the presence of the Lord? Okay, should you fast? Should you fast this week, Alex? You know, it's not bad. The Bible talks about fasting and praying. How do you know if you should fast? The principle. What is the bridegroom doing? How does he feel? I tell you, brother, if Jesus in you is fasting, then you better fast. But if he is not fasting, then you shouldn't fast. Do you see that? Whatever he is doing, whatever the bridegroom, whatever delights him, whatever causes us to have his sweet presence, that is the principle. And that's what the Lord shows. Forget the outward things. Forget the inherited things. Forget the traditional things. Remember me! As long as I'm here. And right now, I am happy. So you better be happy. That's what the Lord is basically saying. That's my amplified version of this verse. That's my translation. So this is a case study here. I want to impress you how quickly something that is genuinely of God can, in man's hand, become a religion. This should sober us. Okay, so now I want to run through some of these verses in Galatians. And let's go back to the title right now, The Pattern of Paul and the Religion of James. You really have to think about that title. And you may say, well, I thought we were just covering Paul. I have a particular burden to present what the New Testament shows us in a way of contrast. This may really go against many of our concepts. So I need to ask you to exercise your spirit, to prayerfully consider what I'm sharing, exercise your keen mind to understand and discern what is being presented here in the Scriptures. I want to start with the pattern of Paul. The pattern of Paul. Because, as I mentioned, Paul had a very religious background. But when he met Christ, his life radically changed. And what is the pattern of Paul? I have these 3 verses here in Galatians which show us what Paul was doing, right? Remember, Paul is traveling, okay? Paul is traveling around here. What is he saying? What is he ministering? What is he preaching? What is he living? What is he expressing? what is the pattern of Paul? Let's read Galatians 1:15 through 16a all together. Ready? Go.
But when it pleased God, who set me apart from my mother's womb, and called me through his grace, to reveal his Son in me, that I might announce him as the gospel.
Okay, and then 2:20a, next verse.
I am crucified with Christ, and it is no longer I who live, but it is Christ who lives in me.
And then the next verse, 4:19. Ready?
My children, with whom I travail again in birth, until Christ is formed in you.
Okay, I'm just, time is limited, but I want to use these marvelous verses to present to us what is Paul's focus? What is the pattern of Paul? And based on these verses, some key phrases should jump out. I mean, I have a piece of chalk, but I wanted to highlight them. If you have a pen, you better circle these, because look at Galatians 1. What is his pattern here? I would highlight as a crucial phrase, to reveal his Son in me. And then, that I might announce him as the gospel. Paul doesn't say, to reveal his Son to me. The big difference. It's not that the Son of God was revealed to Paul, but it was the Son was revealed in me, that I might announce him as the gospel. It's not even I might announce the gospel, like I'm going to announce some good news. No, I announce him. I announce a person as the gospel. And this person is revealed in me. Now, last week we had quite some help. Has Christ been revealed in you? Not just to you, but in a living way. Do you realize that Christ is within you? I hope everyone in this room, if you haven't, you would have this seeking. And in your college years, this would be your experience. I will never forget, as a freshman in college, I was in school in Philadelphia, and I was crossing the intersection at 34th and Walnut in Philadelphia. From the northwest corner of the intersection, from the northwest to the southwest at 34th and Walnut. And as I was crossing the street, the Lord had been working in me that whole year. And as I was crossing the street, I just had this revelation. Christ is in me. I started out on one curb, just minding my day, and by the time I got to the next curb, I was just amazed. I had heard about this my whole life, but the revelation was Christ lives in me. This is Paul's focus, the revelation of Christ in you. Okay, and then what else? Galatians 2:20. I am crucified with Christ, and it's no longer I who live, but it is Christ who lives in me. It's not just Christ being revealed in me, but Christ living in me. That means day by day, whatever we do, Christ is living. You're studying, Christ is studying in you. When you're driving, Christ is driving in you. This is Paul's focus. And then Galatians 4:19, my children with whom I travail again in birth until Christ is formed in you. Okay, do you get a taste of Paul's focus? It's not good enough just to be revealed in you, not good enough just to have him living in you, but he needs to be formed in you. That means there's something so substantial, so solid. This is actually to have the maturity of Christ within us. This is deep, but this is the pattern of Paul. Okay, so what is the pattern of Paul? It's just Christ, right? It's just Christ. He is revealed, that's an R, by the way, revealed in me, living in me, formed in me. And everywhere he went, this was his gospel. This is all he cared about. This is all he cared about. And so, while he is doing this, though, remember how quickly that religion, how John's radical start became a religion. Okay, while Paul is here, something else is going on. And this is sobering. But immediately, the new teachings of Christ, the new wine, is being put into old wineskins. It is being mixed up. And a religion is taking place. And Paul is traveling. He is preaching this thing. While he is out there, something nefarious, something subtle, something outwardly good is taking place, which is actually competing with this. You think, wow, that's some strong language. Let's continue reading. Galatians 1, verses 6 and 8. Ready? Go.
I marvel that you are so quickly removing from him who has called you in the grace of Christ to a different gospel. But if even we or an angel out of heaven should announce to you a gospel beyond that which we have announced to you, let him be accursed.
Okay, time is running out. I need you to really stay with me and focus on some key phrases here. Paul is writing this epistle because this thing is happening. And so underline this phrase, removing from him. You see that? People came into the churches of Galatia and started teaching this new religion, this mixture. So Paul's warning them, you are so quickly. You see that? That's just like John. So quickly. It happens so quickly. You're removing from him. And then he says, a different gospel. A different gospel. And he is so strong. Even if an angel out of heaven announces to you a gospel beyond that which we have announced to you, let him be accursed. Paul is saying, this is the gospel. Don't listen to a different gospel. Don't go beyond this gospel. Because this is happening. Okay. How is this taking place? Who is behind this? Well, Satan is behind this. Satan is behind this. Yet, complicit is actually all the people of God who have religious inclinations. And even in a modern day sense, that could easily include us, even myself, if we have any kind of inclination to do something more, right? Oh, we need something more than Christ. You have a big problem in your life, Alex, and you say, well, I need to pray. I need to see what Christ feels. But you're just not clear. So you know what? You say, you know what? I'm just going to go talk to Evan. Evan is mature in Christ. He knows all the answers. Evan, what should I do? And you say, well, okay, on the one hand, that's not bad if you're fellowshipping in the body. But if you are going to him like some life instruction guide, and you are forgetting this person who is living in you, that's something more. That's something beyond. That is a danger. Now let's look at Galatians 2, 11 and 12. Let's read this all together. Ready? Go.
When Cephas came to Antioch, I opposed him to his face because he stood condemned. For before some came from James, he continually ate with the Gentiles. But when they came, he began to shrink back and separate himself, fearing those of the circumcision.
Okay, there's a lot of background here. Who is Cephas, first of all? Does anybody know? Cephas is another name for Peter. So here, we actually have the three top apostles in the whole New Testament. Peter, Paul, and James. They're all here in this verse. Don't we respect all three of them? Don't we honor all three of them? Absolutely. But this is the word in the Bible. And I want you to see something here. Paul is rebuking anybody who would add anything to the gospel, even if this person is a Peter, even if this person is a James. What is taking place here? There is a church life, there is a community where the barrier between Jews and Gentiles was obliterated. And all were living together, feasting together as one new man. But then, because of the influence coming out of Jerusalem, Peter started to shrink back. Again, look at the verses. For before some came from who? From James. He continually ate with the Gentiles. But when they came, he began to shrink back and separate himself, fearing those of the circumcision. What this shows us is that some are coming from Jerusalem, and James is sending his people and saying, how are the churches doing? But as they go out, you know what flavor is being conveyed? It is not the one new man. It is, are we still keeping the distinction between Jews and Gentiles? Are the Jews, are you still being circumcised? Are you still doing this? Are you still keeping the law? And even to the point that Peter, who saw the road, Peter, the disciples came from James, and he started to, he used to be eating with, Alex and Mikhail and enjoying. It doesn't mean he's just eating at a picnic table, like we're just having lunch. That means they're in the homes. They're being built up together. This is a real church life. But then the disciples from James come, and he starts shirking. And now I'm just going to be with the Jews. I'll be with the Jewish believers. You be with the Gentile believers. That is not the gospel. That is Christ plus something else. That is terrible. And so Paul said, I rebuked him to his face. Pretty intense, right? Yeah. Okay, we're not done yet. Galatians 3:3. Let's read 3:3 all together. Ready? Go. Are you so foolish, having begun by the Spirit, are you now being perfected by the flesh? You have to prayerfully read these verses. Paul is telling the Galatians, you began by the Spirit. That means you started with Christ. But now others are coming in and teaching something more. And now you're being perfected by the flesh. That is something, you're moving beyond Christ. Now you're in this group. You're being perfected by the flesh. Actually, if you read some Bible translations where it says, are you so foolish? One translator translates it, dear idiots. How could you start with Christ? You start with Christ, but then you leave Christ. And you just try to live the Christian life by the flesh, by your own effort, by your own labor. Okay. Look at Galatians 5:4. You have been brought to naught, separated from Christ. You who are being justified by law, you have fallen from grace. What is separated from? Right? Yes. From Christ. This is not my words, okay? This is Paul's words. Fallen from grace. That's religion right there. Perfected by the flesh, separated from Christ, fallen from grace. Okay, I'm going to close now with Acts 21. Okay, I want you to see this picture, okay? Consider this. What is going on? While Paul is traveling here, preaching this Christ, ministering this Christ, building up churches all through here, as I've said, there's something coming out of Jerusalem. There's an influence. There's a mixture. It even scares ones like Peter. And the churches start to veer toward this direction. And Paul has to come in and try to adjust them, come back to Christ. But they want to go this way. And it's just like there's this battle going on. And we've been talking a lot about what's going on here this whole year. But have you ever wondered, what is taking place in Jerusalem all this time? You ever thought about that? We've talked about Paul's travels. But what's taking place in Jerusalem? Acts 21 will tell us. How about with your neighbor? You read Acts 21. Those 4 verses right there. have you ever seen this? While Paul is ministering Christ and building up churches, something's taking place in Jerusalem. So Paul goes back. This is Acts 21. Paul is back in Jerusalem. He's been traveling. He's seen what God has done. And he goes to Jerusalem and he tells James and all the elders with him, let me tell you what God has been doing among the Gentiles. You know what James's response is? You know what their response is? First, they glorified God. They said, praise the Lord. That's very good. And then they said, you observe, brother, how many thousands there are among the Jews who have believed, and all are zealous for what? Christ? Zealous for Christ? Zealous for what? For the law. Zealous for religion. What is the law? The law is a big topic, but the law is basically the Old Testament principles, the system of faith and worship, the religion, which Christ came to fulfill, to replace, even to abolish. But do you see that picture? How do you think Paul felt? He's been preaching this gospel all over the Mediterranean, and he comes back, and James said, wow, hey, we have thousands too. But guess what? They're all zealous for the law. And they have been informed concerning you. You are teaching the Jews, you're telling them, don't circumcise their kids, nor to walk according to the customs. I hope you're impressed. You know what religion is? Look at that last phrase. Walk according to the customs. Okay, all of these phrases are straight out of the Bible. Okay, these aren't mine. You know what Paul taught about walking? Look at the verse ahead. Galatians 5:16. All together. Ready? Go. But I say,
walk by the Spirit, and you shall by no means fulfill the lust of the flesh.
There you go. You see that? Oh, James is like, hey, walk according to the customs. The customs. Dude, these are good customs. This is the whole Old Testament, all these things. Okay. Paul says, walk according to the Spirit. Okay. We run out of time here. There's no way in 30 minutes I could give this all-inclusive kind of word that has a very clear ending and you get it. I hope the fellowship this morning has done enough to cause you to see this contrast. And if you see this contrast, you should have a choice. You should make a choice. And that is, do you want to be a disciple of religion, or do you want to be a disciple of Christ? Do you want to follow the pattern of Paul or the religion of James? And I just will conclude in that way, not with a perfect ending, but with an invitation to join us as we learn to be a disciple of Christ. As we learn to focus on Christ, even as we sang in the introductory hymn. How about turn on that page? All together, stanza 3. Ready? Now we're learning to turn to our spirit. Now we're learning to take Christ as life. Now we're learning to feed upon Jesus and be free from all struggling and strife. We are all here as learners. But don't you want to be a pursuer of Christ? What choice do you want to make in your Christian life? Something you have to answer on your own, prayerfully. But I hope you see the contrast here. I would say today, the disciples of religion are endless, countless. How many are truly the disciples of Christ, who would care only for Christ, focus only on Christ? I'm so glad our club name is not religious students, but we are Christian students. We care only for Christ. How about we conclude here? I didn't have a chance to touch all the verses on the back, but you can read it and you can see, again, another contrast. You could just read those verses. How about, I don't know if we have time, can we, for at least a minute in groups? Or what do you think? 2 minutes? It's 12:02. Let's just take 2 minutes. Just talk in groups. Any questions? Any overflow? We may not have all the answers, but stick with us. We're going to develop this all semester. Thank you for your time.